Welcome to Compassionate Conversations, where we push the boundaries of comfort to empower you to become all that you dream of being. I'm so excited to have William Allen back on my channel to do a deeper dive into the topic of highly sensitive men. If you haven't checked out the first interview I did with William, watch it here. I will also include it in the show notes. William Allen is the author of 2 books, Confessions of a Sensitive Man and On Being a Sensitive Man. He also co-hosts the podcast Men with Style with Randy Grasser, writes a regular newsletter and blog for HSP men, and facilitates global online HSP men's groups. He also offers a 16-module self-paced class on being a sensitive man and is featured in the groundbreaking documentary Sensitive Men Rising. He gave me express permission to call him Bill earlier, so that's what I'll do. Welcome, Bill.
Yes, sir. It's good to be back.
You've been doing so many exciting things. I had to have you back. So since we last talked, you've been a very busy bee and created a wonderful podcast, which I can't stop listening to. It's amazing. For highly sensitive men, called Men with Style. And STYLE is an acronym. We'll talk about that. And you've grown your online video meetups for highly sensitive men substantially, which is very exciting. And on a personal note, my husband Nathaniel attended your online HSM groups and absolutely love them. He is now facilitating the Pacific Northwest pod and is making new friends and having a blast. And I just want to thank you for making my husband so happy.
Well, you're quite welcome. He's been such a wonderful addition to the group, Esther. I kid you not. And I was so delighted that he volunteered to lead that group. We desperately needed somebody, and he was the perfect person for it. So thank you for referring him to us.
Yeah, and also I'm sending many of my HSM clients, my therapy clients, to that group, and those that have started love it, and those that are just learning about it are very excited, but a bit nervous being HSPs. But I just think it's a wonderful thing.
Well, thank you.
Yes. So I want to take a deep dive into your why, the reason you're so passionate about HSMs and these projects. And why don't we begin by talking about your wonderful new podcast? So I'm curious about the impetus for the podcast and your goals in doing it.
Well, it's interesting how that started. It actually kind of germinated last year, right after the release of the documentary movie for highly sensitive men, Sensitive Men Rising. But I have a leadership team that I work with. These are some of these guys are CEOs. They're natural leaders. Others are former therapists, and they led men's groups before. And we were having a leadership team meeting. We're talking about how the movie impacted us and how we could do something that would continue that dialogue for men. And one of the guys came up with the idea of doing a podcast. And I've been on a lot of podcasts over the last couple of years, and I just know how much work they are to do. I take my hat off to anybody who does.
You have no idea, Bill. Yes.
I do now.
Hours. Oh, yeah, you do now. Exactly.
But it wasn't top of mind for me to do a podcast because I knew that, and I had so many other things I was working on. So Randy Grasser was part of the team. Hand went right up and he says, "Look, I'd like to do that." And so Randy and I started noodling about it. He did a lot of the setup, and we got a lot of information from his life partner and his business partner, Annette Van Dunnen, who does a wonderful podcast called Sensitive and Strong.
Her as well, and I had them both on my show. They're awesome.
Yeah, they're great. They're great people. And so that's kind of how this kind of was born, was the idea that we wanted to continue the dialogue. There were things in the movie that just couldn't get covered just because of time. And we thought we could deep dive on a few of those and possibly more, and hopefully bring guests on who could share their expertise. And so that's how it was born. It was like this amazing coup that we were able to get as our very first guest, Elaine Aron. Elaine has been a big supporter of highly sensitive men. It's a special place in her heart for highly sensitive men. So I think part of it was because I think she wanted to stand up and say, "Look, I support what you guys are doing, we're just so grateful that she came on. It was a great interview.
Can you explain the acronym style to our listeners?
It's Elaine's acronym. And here's what I'm going to do. It's not what it sounds like. When you see the letters STYLE, you think sensitive and maybe thoughtfulness and a whole bunch of other stuff. It is nothing like that. She had her own characterizations for each one of those letters, and she dives a little bit deeper into each one. So instead of me kind of butchering her style, I'm going to say to your listeners, go to that episode. We dive in on that episode and talk about it, and you can hear it directly from Elaine. But she has, like I said, a definition of what she thinks describes highly sensitive men, and that's what that is. And we're very grateful and thankful that she let us use that as our title for our podcast.
Yeah, she's just so wonderful. And I feel like the highly sensitive person field is just booming right now. Like there's so many podcasts coming out and different blogs and all kinds of things. I think the consciousness is being raised on HSPs and HSMs as well. What bothers me is when people don't attribute the term highly sensitive person to Elaine Aron. She's the one who came up with it. She's done over 40 years, maybe 50 years of research and study. She's leading all of us in this.
Okay. She is absolutely at the top of the chain, and she, without her, I don't know where we'd be with this. Maybe somebody else would have come up, but I honestly to God believe that she was almost divinely inspired to put this together because it's helped so many people.
Saved my life. It literally saved my life.
I hear that constantly too, Esther. I mean, I hear it from the men who say, I didn't know what I was going to do. I thought something was wrong with me. And, that's such an amazing gift that she's given all of us. And it's interesting. One of the guys in one of my groups had written a song that was inspired by Elaine's first book. And him and his writing partner wrote a song, and they were trying to get it to Elaine and couldn't get it through her website because, she gets a lot of stuff. So I reached out to her and shared it with her, and I've got it on the newsletter as well, links to it. And it just gives you an example of what that book meant to so many people.
Beautiful. But to get back to your podcast, that's so wonderful. To me, it is about highly sensitive men, but there's so much that is applicable to highly sensitive women and all genders. And it's just so wonderful, so far reaching. But I wanted to know what it's like for you, because this is your first time co-hosting a podcast, especially between two highly sensitive men. How is that dynamic? How does it work?
Well, first of all, I probably wouldn't have done this with anybody else but Randy. Randy and I have such great rapport. We've been friends for years now. And he found out about high sensitivity because I was on a podcast. It was actually my very first podcast, and he heard it, and he reached out and wanted to communicate with me, wanted me to read a chapter of his book and everything else. And we became really good friends. So we have this really nice rapport between us as it is. Now, it's a different animal being on the asking end than it is on being the receiving end of questions. And so it's a little bit different that way. And we're both kind of learning as we go along as to how to do it. But I think the biggest challenge that I had with this was the idea that when you're asking questions, you're kind of tag teaming two people asking questions for a guest. There has to be this pause, give and take, and letting the other person ask a question. Sometimes it's really hard for me because I'll ask a question, the guest will give a response, and I'll immediately think of three other questions I need to ask. And so I have to pause and yield and let Randy ask his question, and we have to do that kind of thing. So we're learning how to do that together. But for the most part, it's been really easy working together with him, and the guests we've had have been really, really good too. So it's been, the more we do it, the more comfortable we are with it, and I think that starts to show in the way we ask questions and stuff.
You just seem like such a good team, and it feels so natural and authentic coming from both of you, and I just love it. I'm wondering if I could share doing a podcast with someone else. I'm not very good at sharing, but I think it's a good skill. So I was wondering how do you come up with your topics? How do you choose them? How does that work?
Well, I think the main thing is, like I said, from the discussion we initially had that launched this whole thing is to try to find things that are relevant and pertinent to highly sensitive men. So a lot of the topics have to do with, of course, sensitivity, being an HSP man in the world. We've broached on a few things about masculinity. We try to find guests who, in our estimation, help educate highly sensitive men about the trait. And I think that's one of the most important things any HSP can do is educate yourself about the trait, because the more you know about the trait, the more you accept yourself and you realize what a gift it is, and also how to manage some of the challenges of being highly sensitive too. So that's one of our sort of primary goals, is to try to educate people about high sensitivity. And so our selection of topics goes there. Sometimes it's topics that are near and dear to Randy and I, and kind of hope that other HSP individuals that are listening can relate to them. But like I said, we try to find those kind of things, because it is a podcast about highly sensitive men, to get those kind of things that highly sensitive men would find interesting and educational.
Do you have a favorite episode thus far?
I'm not sure. There's a couple of episodes where Randy and I were talking about various things. Now, I was one that we talked about my journey. And it's not because it was talking about me, but it was really kind of special to me because I was able to take some time and kind of reflect on my journey as it's been up to this point. And I think that was kind of special. Obviously, the Elaine Aron interview was great. We had some great guests on that are experts in the field that we've enjoyed having. So honestly, I like them all, but there's a few that do shine.
Any other topics that you want to cover in the future?
There are lots of topics I like to cover. You were talking earlier about highly sensitive men and them learning about the trait and kind of coming into their own. And I think some of the topics that we would like to broach in the future are things that have to do with things that I know of from my discussions in the men's group meetings that are important. It could be HSPs at work. It could be, we did have Lindsay Gerald on, who's one of our leadership team, and he's one of the CEOs I mentioned earlier, talk about how he manages his company as a highly sensitive man, which I hope is inspiration to a lot of highly sensitive men. If they don't have somebody they're working for that's like Lindsay, they should honestly look to seek somebody like that, because Lindsay really personifies what highly sensitive men in leadership positions can be. But things like masculinity, HSPs in the world, relationships, these are all kinds of topics that we'll continue to talk on, dealing with overwhelm and the stressors sometimes that we all face. And I'll tell you what, it's almost like writing the blog. I never always know what I'm going to write a month in advance, 2 months in advance, but I do get inspiration almost always about something that affects me. And I think that could be something I could write about. So I would expect that we'll have a few of those coming up as well, where we just kind of off the top of our head, well, let's do a podcast about this particular aspect. And it's kind of thinly slicing up the topics so that we get into a little bit more detail. You could say, well, there's probably just a finite number of topics you could talk about, but really it's not. If you look at how you can slice a single topic, maybe 5 or 6 different ways. And that's what we'll probably be doing as we go forward. And we're looking for suggestions too. So people who are listening can send in something to Randy or myself and say, look, we'd like you to talk about this. And if we can go find an expert or we can find enough information to talk about it, we most certainly will.
It's just so interesting listening to you, because I do my own podcast and I don't just focus on HSPs, but that is my biggest passion. I find I never run out of ideas for podcast episodes about HSPs, because everything affects us differently. We move through the world differently. We have a different lens. Just the way you were talking about is such an HSP way to describe how we create. To me, it's like we're on this different vibrational level and we get these ideas that seem natural to us, but I don't think many people play around on that level. I think it's like musicians and artists. They have to sort of go to another place to be inspired. And most HSPs, all HSPs that I've ever met, are quite spiritual as well and expansive in the way they think and see the world.
Well, Esther, it's that deep processing. People don't give that enough credit. When they talk about highly sensitive people, a lot of times their focus is on, guys, you guys get overwhelmed all the time, or you're too emotional. they don't realize how deeply we process information. And a lot of that stuff goes on even when I go out for my walk every day. I mean, I'm just like a fountain of ideas flowing through me as I'm going through my walk. And I attributed that to that deep processing capability that we all possess, and being creative too, using the deep processing. So yeah, you're absolutely right.
I get my best ideas. I do hot yoga 3 times a week for 90 minutes in 105-degree room. And that's when it just flows through me and I get all these ideas, just trying to stay alive. And I guess it's maybe focusing on something else, but it's kind of neat to put those two together. So how do you want it to grow in the future as it evolves, your podcast? Any visions?
Well, like I said, I honestly, when you talk about the why for me, my passion is about high sensitivity. I am going to be 70 years old in about a month, and I've lived a long life, and I'm grateful to have had the life I had. But had I known what I know now when I was 20, what a difference my life would have been. Choices I would have made, selections I made, and so forth like that, that affected me throughout the course of my life. So this is kind of my way of saying, now that I know this, and I'm still learning, we're all learning about this trait, is to make sure that other highly sensitive men, I don't care how old they are, whether they're young or whether they're in their midlife or even at my age or older, that they get that information about how special this trait is, and that their whole life they've been told they're different. They've been told that there's something wrong with them, and they feel that. They carry that with them like a weight. So when you finally start to hear that it's a gift, and just as we mentioned how that gift can manifest itself and being able to use that, that's where I'd like to see this podcast go, is to continue down an educational path for men. And I'd love to be reaching a lot more younger men, because there is a crisis going on right now about masculinity in the world. Young men are lost. And I think that highly sensitive men, as the movie kind of espouses, and I hope everyone gets a chance to watch the movie now that it's out and it's available, that they understand that highly sensitive men can have a role in changing the narrative about what masculinity looks like. I think because naturally we are sort of a different type of men. And I think that the qualities that we bring to bear are the idea that we allow ourselves to be more emotional. We allow ourselves to be more intuitive. We allow ourselves to be these deep thinkers and creative thinkers and so forth, that could open up worlds for other men, maybe that aren't as highly sensitive as we are, for a new way of doing that. Again, it's another way of outreaching to men, especially to young, highly sensitive men, which is a target market I really would like to see us move more aggressively into.
It's a Jewish saying, from my lips to God's ears. I hope that manifests if you think about what's happening in the world right now.
Absolutely.
The toxic masculinity is so reactive. It's the primitive brain. It's the sympathetic nervous system. It's the fight or flight or freeze. And most highly sensitive men, I notice in my therapy practice, they freeze. They're not fighters, and they don't flee because they're strong and they're courage, and they're very principled and willing to fight for a cause, but they're not reactive. They think things through and they take their time, and they come up with unique observations and the ability to see all sides of things.
Absolutely. And I think a lot, like you said, a lot of the traits that we highly sensitive people have would help, I think, men. This has always been my argument here, is that men have a restrictive, by culture, right, and by training, they have a restrictive access to all human capabilities that they have. Emotion is certainly one of those capabilities, but men are restricted in what they can do with that. As you said, it sometimes manifests, especially for men who've been repressing or tamping down their emotional feelings and not exposing themselves as being vulnerable and looking for help. What happens is that manifests in violence or aggression. And a lot of times it's directed towards women and children. And to me, that's something that I think we need to seriously address in our culture. It's a mental health issue as well. And I think that, highly sensitive men being more open to things like mental health and counseling and things, being able to express emotions, and the full palette of human emotions. Those are things that we can model for other men. And I think study after study has shown that because men are not allowed to be fully human most of the time because they have to play this role that we've been told about as far as masculinity is concerned, it's costing us in health and it's costing us in quality of life for a lot of men. And I think it's time that we enter the 21st century, which we have, with an idea of changing the way that we look at the role that men play in the world. And I think that this is where highly sensitive men could have a big role. And that's like I said, I wish I had a roadmap for that, but I know it in my soul and I know it in my heart that this is something that we can start doing. And if we can get to the young guys, because they're being led by these misogynistic individuals who are angry, insecure, and are sending a terrible message, I think the intervention would be, let's do it the HSP way. Let's show them that they can be kinder, gentler, more compassionate, more thoughtful, and still not lose their masculinity.
Beautiful. That is so wonderful. I'm with you, and we will create it, as I really believe that we're all in this together. And things are lifting, they're rising, and the truth is being spoken. I started a podcast because I'm a highly sensitive person, and I just finally realized that I had a voice and that I could use it, and I needed to use it. And the HSP's voices are needed in the world now more than ever. So I get past my own fear. I feel like throwing up before every interview. I have so much anxiety about doing this, but I'm doing it. My why is bigger than my fear.
Yeah, you're doing a beautiful job, Esther. I really enjoy talking to you, and I feel very comfortable in this interview, and I understand completely how you feel. Somebody once told me, when you get nervous before something like that, and it was a very simple thing that someone told me at work many years ago, they said, it's because you care.
Oh,
it's because you care. If you didn't care, you wouldn't be nervous about it. Channeling that nervousness into the energy that you're providing here on your podcast, that's wonderful. That's what we all need to be doing.
Yeah, thank you. So why don't we talk about your virtual highly sensitive men groups? What was the impetus for creating the space for highly sensitive men? And tell us your why for taking on this big project.
Well, it kind of got started by happenstance. I kept getting these emails from guys that wanted to talk to me about the book. And I would dial up, we'd do a Zoom call or something, and we'd talk. And I thought some of the stuff that was going on in these conversations was phenomenal. I was excited about it. And so I started thinking, well, this is something we ought to do in a group. So I got 5 or 6 guys together and we started talking, meeting on a regular basis. And the conversations were just like you would expect from HSPs. They were all over the place, but all over the place in good ways. It was spiritual stuff. We talked about neuroscience. We talked about psychology and different types of therapeutic things that people were doing and that kind of stuff. It was exciting. And so at some point I said, you know what, I ought to open this up and just let's have it for a wide range of highly sensitive men so we could get more people talking. And I got a lot of benefit out of doing that, of being able to talk to other men. And, it's one thing to write a book in isolation and send it out in the world and stuff, but to actually get feedback while you're talking with somebody or being in a sort of virtual room with other highly sensitive men was a real uplifting experience. And it started to grow. It started getting bigger and bigger over a couple of years. Although at some point it got really kind of tedious for me. And I kept thinking, okay, I'm not getting a lot out of this. And that's when I started to form the leadership team. And these were people who were experienced. They were therapists, or they were coaches, or they were leaders, whatever. And they all got together with me and we noodled this idea of how we were going to do these meetings going forward. So the upshot of that was in 2023 was we were going to do a big tent meeting, which is the one that is usually kind of the first exposure meeting for people. It's usually more people and the entry sort of barriers is not very high. I try to get men in there who are curious about it. It's an opportunity for them to talk to other HSP men, introduce themselves. And for a lot of these guys, that's a heck of a revelation to know there's another guy out there. There's other guys out there that think and feel the way I do. And then we also decided too, in parallel, to start these regional groups. Now, you can imagine trying to do a virtual meeting for the entire world and pick a time frame that works. It's really very difficult to do. But the regional groups would be in time zones. And so they would be easier for these guys to get together and meet in a time that was agreeable for them. And they were smaller groups. They're 6 to 8, maybe 10 men. And they would be meeting together. So they would get some rapport with each other. With the big tent meetings, it's come as you go, right? People come in, come out, and leave, whatever. You get whoever you get when you get those meetings. Now, they're good, they're meaningful, and people get a lot out of them. But if you wanted to get with a group of guys in your region, wherever it is in the world, to meet, you can have these deep, deep discussions in the same time period. Plus, you could extend your meetings would be, let's say, every month. You could have a topic that runs for 3 months because you pick up where you left off. So for HSPs who like to do deep diving, and we all do, that was more meaningful and more helpful. And I think that the guys get more comfortable when they're in the pod group because they see the same guys, they feel safe, they feel secure that they can talk and be vulnerable. And I think that promotes that open discussion that these highly sensitive men have been looking for their whole lives.
Well, you're building trust, and it would be such an alternate reality for most men who have had to posture toxic masculinity culture, and where they can actually just be themselves and let all that go. I just watched my husband. He's being transformed. I could cry. It's so beautiful. He's 57 and just meeting highly sensitive men for the first time in his life. And he's being transformed. It's a metamorphosis watching what is happening to him.
And that does my heart good to know that, because this is about the men. This is not about me. I'm not promoting a product. I'm not selling anything. There's no paywalls to get into this. And the reason I don't charge or do any of that is because there's 1 billion highly sensitive men on the planet. We need to get an outreach going to all these men. So many of them don't even know that they're highly sensitive. Many of them who do know don't know what to do with it. And a lot of them are still kind of what you guess you'd call behind the curtain or in the closet or whatever you want to call it. And they can't be themselves. This is the living hell that I think a lot of highly sensitive people deal with, is the idea that we can't be authentic. We can't be who we are because we've been told that that's not a good thing, that we're, too sensitive, too emotional, too prone to be running away from criticism, et cetera, et cetera. All the negative pejorative things they can come up with. But when you get into a group of men, like these groups are, and you can talk, and I just see it, their face lights up when somebody says something and somebody else agrees with them. It's almost as if they're saying, I didn't realize there was somebody else who had the same experience that I have. And for the first time, in many cases, these guys are feeling like they're validated, that there's nothing wrong with them, that there are other people like them. And to me, that's gold. That's just to be able to see men be able to come around like that. And I think the idea with these groups is to continue to grow this pod concept. We can talk more about that in a minute, but the idea is that as we do, we're reaching more men. And it's going to hopefully go viral amongst the HSP male community, because that's really what I would love to see.
That's my wish for it too, Bill, and I believe that will happen. I really believe that HSPs are on this high vibrational level. Well, I think we're called to being on a high vibrational level. We don't often heed the call because it means abandoning the people that aren't on that level. But once we realize that we can come back and forth, that we can rise to our highest potential and do what we need to do in the world, it's boundless what we can do. And we have so much to contribute to the world. I always talk in terms of superpowers. HSPs have superpowers. It's just wonderful. It's so lovely to hear. And I have to say, just as an HSP woman, I'm jealous of these groups. I don't have anything like that for women, but I totally understand that men have had such a hard go, and there's such constricted roles and behaviors that you're allowed to exhibit and who you're supposed to be. I think it's much worse for men. I also believe that HSPs in general, we all need to stick together. It's such a relief when you meet another HSP. I just recently thought to myself, I should make some HSP friends. I'm 54, and I just came to that realization that maybe I would do well with being friends with people that are like me. I interviewed another therapist who is an HSP about the menopausal transition, and we've become good friends. She's in New Jersey. I can't even describe what it feels like. Like, our conversations they're just like you said, all over the place, but deep topics. And we go to every place and back. And it's so rich and rewarding. And I find when I have a conversation with another HSP like that, that fills me for about 2 weeks. It's like fills my cup, and I'm good to go for a while. I was going to ask you about challenges and mistakes you've made along the way in the groups. Do you have anything you wanted to add to that? Or
I think one of the things for the group itself, sometimes we have new guys come in, and one of the rules we have, and I kind of adopted this from Jacqueline Strickland's HSP gatherings, which is this: you can come to the meeting. We encourage engagement, but you don't have to. All right, there's no requirement that you have to talk, or you have to, aside from introducing yourself, maybe telling a little bit about yourself. You don't have to say a word the rest of the way. But what I find invariably is that these men will start opening up, and they'll start talking about something, because eventually they're going to hit a topic or something that resonates with them. And it's that deep conversation that particularly men are not encouraged to have with other men. Particularly, men are supposed to be more stoic. The lone wolf metaphor, sort of hangs over a lot of men. The idea of getting together with other men and talking, I think that's a problem for a lot of men. And even HSP men have to get past that indoctrination about going against their natural inclination, which would be to sit and talk at a deep level. And when they are given permission to do that, it's like, boom, the bubble bursts and they can be themselves, and it's wonderful. So a lot of the challenges are, getting men, especially even highly sensitive men, to say, I'll try this. Let me give it a shot, because it's going against every bit of programming they've ever had in their lives. And once they've done it, they're hooked, because it's fulfilling a piece of them that's missing, very badly missing, that they need. And they didn't realize they needed it so much.
Yeah. Yeah. I just think of my husband and I work with a lot of highly sensitive men as therapy clients, and they just stuff so much down, so much emotion. They just have to stuff it, and that to go somewhere. So most of the guys that I see for therapy, they're suffering from depression and or anxiety, which is a lot of stuffed emotion, a lot of unresolved traumas and stuff. And once they start to connect and they engage with me and we build a trusting relationship, then they feel open. And then I suggest talking to other men. It's just beautiful to watch that whole awakening. It's a true awakening that happens. And I see people freeing themselves of anxiety and deep depression and getting off medications and all kinds of amazing things when they start to accept who they are as highly sensitive men and know that someone can listen to them and that they have a right to use their voice and that they can connect with other highly sensitive people, and men especially, is so powerful. So I'm thinking, as this consciousness keeps expanding about high sensitivity, especially around highly sensitive men, what advice do you have for others who are creating online or in-person meetups for highly sensitive people?
First of all, I would highly encourage them to do it. The gist of all of these groups, this isn't group therapy that we're doing here, because I'm not qualified to do that. I certainly wouldn't encourage that. But these are discussion groups, and there's value in just talking about the trait. And it's value in being able to discuss with other people. One of the things you have to keep in mind is that highly sensitive people are very cautious and are, sometimes a bit wary about things. And so what you do have to do, as we said earlier, is you have to build this trust and this safety that they can feel when they come into, especially highly sensitive men, because if you're going to allow them to talk like we all want them to do, they have to feel safe in being vulnerable, which is, again, going against training. There is a difference between virtual meetings, and there are challenges doing virtual meetings versus doing meetups where you're actually meeting people in person and so forth. There's a lot lost in that process. I mean, as human beings, we need to feel the presence of the people that we're with And as highly sensitive people, we also are very observant. We look at body cues and voice intonation, everything else, and all that factors in when you're having a physical meeting.
I was just going to say, Bill, sorry, I just wanted to interject. We, in terms of nervous system regulation, we co-regulate each other in person. It's very hard to do that virtually.
Absolutely.
Yeah, our nervous system. That's why AI will never be able to be a therapist. People keep saying that AI is going to do therapy. No, it doesn't have a nervous system. That's how our bodies and minds work. We need to co-regulate with each other. But it can happen online, but I think it's more powerful in person.
Yeah, absolutely. And ideally, what I would like to see is these pod groups sort of spawn in-person meetings. If you're in a region, let's say, for example, we have a lot of members in the Seattle area. Well, that would be a great place, and it's close enough to Victoria. So to be able to do some kind of regional meetup where they could actually physically be together. And so that would be ideal to be able to get to that point. And something that we'd like to do in the future is start doing some HSP men retreats. So that's a very early germination stage right now, just some talks that we're having about doing that. But that would be ideal, is to be able to do that bonding that you get when you're with somebody physically. But the virtual meetings can work too. Again, you're going to trade off a few things as a result of doing that. But if you're trying to get outreach going, then virtual may be the easiest way to get it started. It's the least costly way of doing it. And you can reach a greater geographical area if you're doing a virtual meeting. But the idea, again, regardless of whether it's virtual or in person, is you want to be able to create the environment that a highly sensitive person will feel comfortable in. And if you're a highly sensitive person and you're doing these meetings, you should intuitively know what that is. What makes you comfortable is more likely going to make them comfortable as well. And so just providing those kind of guidelines and doing that. And what I like to think too, and what I've learned, is that highly sensitive men or highly sensitive people, you don't have to probe them too much. Once they get started, the conversations flow, the topics, as a rule, we're generally very intelligent people, very observant people. We know what's going on around us. We know what's going on in the world. They're very topical naturally. Topics will come up. You don't have to force feed them. And I think the idea is to let them express themselves naturally in the meeting. And I've seen this a million times over. When I meet a highly sensitive person for the first time, usually within 5 minutes, we are like in love because we're on the same wavelength. As you put it, vibrationally, we're in the same place. And so I think it's easier when highly sensitive people get together sometimes because we can get into that kind of, that sense of who we are and in relation to the other people in the room. It's an awareness. That's what I call it. It's kind of an awareness of what's around you in the environment. So those would be the main things I would suggest to people. If you're thinking about doing it and it's starting to move you, then do it. You may have to learn as you go along, but you will learn because it's not as difficult as it seems. But it's really important that we do those kind of things.
I'm just wondering if you screen potential members of your online community, virtual community. Have you figured out a system for that?
Yeah. You know what I used to do, Esther? I used to talk to every single person coming in. I'd have a 30-minute call with them and I'd go through it. And the reason is maybe the subtext was to sort of vet, see, is this person going to fit in well with our group? But more importantly, I wanted to understand what they were looking for. And if they were looking for something completely different, if they were looking for a group therapy, then I would let them know this is not what this is. Maybe this is not what you want to do. This is what we do. We talk as a discussion group, and maybe looking for a therapist might be your best solution here. But it got to the point where I couldn't do it anymore. There was too many people coming in. So I have not a questionnaire or something, but they have to go through a registration process. And then there's a follow-up to get into the pod groups where I ask them more questions about what they're looking for, and I try to fit them where I think they would fit within the region they're trying to get into. But here's what I found. There are not too many people that are trolls that are running around that want to identify as highly sensitive men. So I haven't had very much difficulty at all finding good members coming in, people who are genuinely interested. Those who aren't will drift away, right, on their own. Rarely do I have problems with people in the meetings. We always have very well run meetings where people, respect each other. And when we get to the pod level, like where Nate is, they make up their own rules. They decide what the engagement process is, how they talk, whether they start off with a meditation or whether they do a talking stick, virtual talking stick, whatever they do, they create their own rules. It's self-led. And that way they can determine if somebody's going to fit in or not. And if they don't, they let me know. And then I, follow up with that person to find out what the issues are and so forth and so on. But it really kind of self-polices itself. And I've had a lot of good luck that way without having to go through an extensive vetting process. And I hope that continues. But, for now, it's like I said, try to keep the barriers as low as I can to get in because I want to reach as many HSP men as possible. But we will not tolerate people who are disruptive, people who are disrespectful, or would try to in any way make security and safety a troublesome issue in the meetings because of their presence.
So I'm just wondering if you could lead us through, if someone listening or watching this wants to dip their toe in the water and join one of your online meetings, what does a typical HSM virtual meetup session look like?
Well, the Big Tent meeting, which is the one where it's the best place to start, okay, is to go to one of those. And you just go to my website and register to be on the distribution list and just show up when the next meeting is. Typically, those meetings are a little bit different than the pod groups because, like I said, we got a whole crew of people coming in and out all the time. I start off with some announcements. It's a great place for me to be able to announce things like the movie, the podcast, whether it's some meeting or meetup or something like Jacqueline's HSP Gatherings. I like to share that information with these guys because sometimes they don't know where it is or get it. I try not to take too much of that time. Depending on how many men we have, if we have more than 12, I break us into breakout rooms. That way it sort of simulates the pod groups by getting it to a smaller, more manageable number. We usually start out with intros. Usually it's what's your name? Where are you from? When did you find out about being an HSP? And they'll give us a little bit of taste of who they are that way. A lot of times that's a great icebreaker to get conversation going. And then we have a topic or topics that they talk about. Now, what I try to do is encourage these guys to bring topics to the meeting. And if they do, I tell them it goes to the top. I have a list of topics we can talk about as default topics. If nobody's coming in with anything, but I like for that to bubble up from the group because it's their group, it's their discussion, and they've got questions. I know some of them will volunteer with a topic, others will be a little hesitant to, but as they get comfortable, they'll start to do that. And we'll talk for the rest of the time that we have. Then we'll wrap up and we'll, schedule the next month's meeting and so forth. So the main thrust of these things is you have an opportunity to meet and network with other men. You can find that fellowship and community because when I did the surveys last year of all my HSP men in the men's groups, fellowship was like at the very top. I want to meet other highly sensitive men. So the idea that you get a chance to meet these guys, meet people like yourself, that's really important. We learn from each other. We learn from each other. Nobody knows everything, so we're sharing all the time. And then what I think is really important, and I like to see more men do, is these are networking opportunities. If somebody says something, you can sit in the chat and you can send them a note and say, hey, I really like what you said. Do you think we could get together offline and talk about that? That's what I'd like to see more of. And it's starting to happen more and more as men are getting comfortable. And again, if they're really enjoying this, they might want to consider doing the pod groups, like I said, because there's more consistency in who's there. You'll see the same guys, and topics can run a little bit deeper. But that's generally what we do in the meetings.
Highly sensitive men are all unique and have different personalities, ages, backgrounds. I was just wondering, how do you deal with differences, or does that even matter? Is it just so wonderful for them that they're all HSMs that they can put all that aside, or is there some of the elders teaching and the younger ones learning?
Let me tell you something. I've had very young guys on here who have been absolutely profound in some of the things that they observed and have talked about. This is what's so cool about highly sensitive people. You don't have to be my age to garner some wisdom out of being a highly sensitive person. Our observational and learning skills are really phenomenal. And even some of the younger 20-year-olds will have some great observations and discussion points that we can all learn from. So I think that, there really is nothing there that, age-wise, but it does happen where we have some of the older guys talking to the younger guys. To your point, though, we're all unique. And what was one of the first things I learned when I was writing about high sensitivity was the fact that we share some common traits that really are very important. They're not insignificant. As you said early in the podcast, that's how we see the world. We view through our HSP lens, but we interpret on the back end a lot of times differently because we all have unique experiences. Our environment that we grew up with, the kinds of things that we went through as children and as adults all shape who we are. But I think what keeps the buying together with the men is sharing those common, whether it's the does traits, the DOAS that Elaine talks about, or some other elements, maybe shared experience as men, having been criticized, shamed, humiliated, whatever. These are all common elements. So I think that's what they're looking to bind to is the commonality. But we do respect and honor the uniqueness and the differences that we have. But I think the thing that binds us is those common traits that we share as HSPs.
Wonderful. I'm just wondering, is there something else that you're working on that we haven't discussed today? What you're excited about most for the future, all of these wonderful projects?
Well, I'm, like I said, I'm excited about the podcast. This is the newest thing I've been working on, but I am working on a novel right now. And it's about an HSP man, and he's going through his big transition in his life. And even though the book is not specifically, kind of talking about high sensitivity, you see it in his characterization. And it's kind of a hero's journey for him. So hoping that, I guess the only thing I can think of, it's kind of like the Celestine prophecy in that way, and that he's going on a spiritual journey and doesn't recognize it, but until he's going through it and so forth. So that's been a lot of fun and something I've always been wanting to do. I'd like to, I could mention again, the HSP retreats for men. That's something that is very early on, but it's something that kind of ties into that being together in the same physical space for men and gearing it specifically for men and the way men think and act and operate. And so that's something that I'm looking forward to as well. So yeah. And you never know, our ideas percolate all the time. So I never know, I may have something next week that I'm not even thinking about.
It's been so wonderful to talk to you, Bill. And I'm just so excited. And thank you on behalf of all highly sensitive people for the work that you're doing. It is wonderful. And, to know that you're not making any money off of it or very little, it's definitely a passion project.
It is a passion project, yes. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, thank you, Esther. I appreciate you having me again. It was lovely talking to you.
If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with others, and subscribe to this channel. Thanks so much.